Welcome to See Me. Today's guest is a powerhouse in the global hospitality industry and a passionate advocate for neurodivergent inclusion, Philip Mahoney. As Senior Vice President of Food and Beverages for Raffles and Fairmont Hotels and Resorts, Philip leads the culinary and beverage vision for one of the world's most prestigious hotel groups, building guest experiences that are as thoughtful as they are unforgettable. With over 30 years of leadership across global brands like Acre, Radisson, and Riverstone, Philip's career is a masterclass in strategy, creativity, and customer-centric thinking. But what makes his story even more powerful is his personal connection to our theme. Philip is neurodivergent himself and a proud father of 4 children, some of whom are neurodivergent. His lived experience brings a rare depth of insight into how we can build workplaces and lives that are more inclusive, adaptive, and empathetic. Today, we'll talk with Philip about navigating executive leadership through a neurodivergent lens, parenting with awareness and advocacy, and creating environments where every brain can thrive. It's a conversation full of heart, strategy, and inspiration. Let's get started. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you so much.
Personally, what does neurodivergent mean to you? What's your own personal definition or...
I guess, I guess somewhat. To be perfectly frank with you, this is something that I only really started thinking about in the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years. So it was sort of realization that I had a boss once, a really good boss, very, very tolerant person, and he said to me, "You really are special." And and I thought, "Oh my God, here we are." So it's just that point of difference, I guess, that always thinking slightly differently. And someone once said to me, "You're always processing, you're always processing." I said, honestly, sometimes there's absolutely nothing going on in my head at all. So it is just thinking differently, acting differently, and I guess perceiving differently, which is really where the crux comes to it.
I find that really interesting that, where you say there's nothing going on in your head at all, because I don't ever experience that.
I,
And I'm
I
like,
was
that
probably
is lovely.
I was probably telling a mistruth there, but it was that whole thing of someone watching you in this was in a meeting environment, and someone watching me taking everything in, and he said he just felt like the wheels are turning all the time, and processing and analyzing everything that's going on around me. But of course, everyone is doing that. It's just a question of whether it's conscious or unconscious, and that's one of the things that I try and tap into in the workplace environment. We're always talking about positive and negative emotions that people are having more than 200 times a minute, and how we can make as many of those emotions positive. And if we get the sum of the parts right, then that's great. But that processing thing is always going on. It's just that some of us are more acutely aware of it
Yeah.
than others, and I think we're those of us that are neurodivergent, that have a situation where we're always thinking, how was that perceived by the other person? Would I have done that? And I'm sure your listeners it will resonate with them when you have flashbacks to something 30 years ago, where you think, why did I say that? Why didn't I do something completely differently? And you're like, get over it, man. Just get over it. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And I was having a conversation with one of my daughter's teacher. Well, it wasn't a teacher, but someone connected with the school, about an exam result which didn't go well for her, and she said, well, she'll quickly bounce back from this. I said, she's autistic. She will never, ever bounce back from this. You have to understand that. And the fact that you're in education and don't understand that thought process is really, really worrying to me.
When I talk about when I went through my training and like clinical supervision and ongoing therapy, there's just things that I could never click. You know, doing cognitive behavioral therapy, there's some parts of myself that they are me, and you know, you can be annoyed about something and then logically process it, but it's still going to be there. It's just accepting that that's probably still going to be there, and we just continue navigating through that daily. But I think that's around acceptance, but very, very important there for anyone in the education system. Please to be aware of diagnosis, and if you feel that it's something that you're not aware of right now, it's really important to start making yourself aware and building them conversations. How old is your daughter?
She's 18.
18, right? So challenging.
Mm.
So how would you say then your journey in hospitality has been defined around inclusion?
Oh, well, it's really interesting because this is something I again have only relatively recently started talking about and being very open about it in the workplace, and making a joke of it actually, really as a form of self-excuse, I think. But you know, I recently did a presentation in front of a peer group of, I don't know, about 150 people in the audience, and I was trying to get across a particular point, and it was best described of, you know, if you don't understand it, get a neurodivergent person to explain it to you. And I said, who here in this room is neurodivergent? By show of hands, of course, no one put their hand up, and I was like, just me then. Statistically, very improbable, but okay, we'll go with it. You know, there is that stigma there still, that people won't have that realization. But if you look at organizations like the Burn Project, which is really interesting, tackling mental health in the hospitality business, their studies are showing that neurodivergence is something is a much higher rate in the hospitality industry than in others, because it's one of those work environments that really suits our mindset. So, you know, we have this incredible task focus approach. We have the ability to socialize, because this idea that all neurodivergent people are unsociable is just nonsense. And but we need an excuse. We need a platform. And I'm going to speak very simplistically. So if people are throwing things at the speaker and saying, you know, this is completely wrong, I look at it through that autism color wheel, and how people are, you know, have different traits and different experiences. So I can really only look at it through my lens, because I'm not like you, a psychologist. So, but you know, if I look at the draw into the hospitality business, where suddenly we are getting a real kick out of working with people in a real camaraderie type environment, a real sort of almost military-esque type environment, sort of shoulder to shoulder, really in the weeds sometimes, and in facing adversity a lot of times. That really resonates, and it provides that great platform for sociability and camaraderie. But also from that whole people pleasing aspect, you know, there's nothing more satisfying than getting a smile from someone and a thank you from someone whom you've just you know, delivered a great hospitality experience for. So that is really rewarding, and so it does attract people who are neurodivergent. And you know, if you look at the prevalence of ADHD in the kitchen, is something that, again, not to diagnose people, but just to step back and watch, is incredible. I mean, it's definitely very prevalent. So it appeals precision, task focus, reward, recognition, all of these things, that sociability, but with not unfounded sociability, are all things that will appeal to someone with a neurodivergent mind. And so yeah, it's going to be it allows for people to come into this business. It's only when you progress in your career, and again, this is a industry which you can progress very, very quickly. And so when you progress and you get to that point where suddenly you have to start thinking a little bit more traditionally in terms of how you go about things. I mean, if you think of that, the kitchen environment, the food service environment, the front of house, the front desk experience, you can have a real laugh on that sort of environment. You can be totally a-traditional and go for it. My first job was on the front desk in a hotel in Boston, in the US, and it was just hilarious, and I couldn't believe that you could do a job and get paid for it and have so much fun. So so I think that side of the business is great, and it rewards, and as I say, you've got so many like-minded individuals.
Yeah.
It's fine. As you progress, as you suddenly become more mainstream, more corporate, it becomes more problematic, and there you have to be aware of your behaviors and your thoughts, and and you either have to conform to this corporate bullshit, or you have to or you have to be totally upfront and overt about the sort of person you are, and sort of take me as I am, because this is how I am. My sort of opening gambit is always, I'm a mix of Scottish, English, and Irish. That makes me a miserable bastard who swears too much and drinks too much. So that's who I am. So but it's a difficult exercise to teach people, if you like.
And you saying that about the corporate world and the fact that you either conform or you say, you know what, this is who I am,
Yeah.
and this is how we work. I think that's so important. That we're allowed to be individuals and that it's okay to voice that. And I would imagine that wasn't easy to do, or would I be incorrect?
No, it's very difficult, and to be perfectly frank with you, I'm not sure I've mastered it yet. What
Mm.
I do, and I'm sure many people like me, is gravitate towards cultures which foster that particular environment. The job that I'm in at the moment, was something that was offered by the CEO at the time, who'd known me for 25 years. We knew each other very well. We'd worked together. He knew exactly what I was like, and so I naturally migrated towards that sort of environment where I'd feel safe, and I wouldn't have to explain myself, because it's just who he is. Just accept that's what he does. When you're in an environment which is where there's a cultural misfit, then it becomes much, much more complicated. And that happened to me in a recent job where, again, I had a great environment, great culture, and then suddenly it changed with an acquisition, and I didn't fit in anymore, and I could either conform, or try and talk to them, which in this case just simply wasn't possible, or leave, and so that's why I left that job.
Well, you respected yourself enough to do that. That probably was, I imagine, was pretty difficult to do. Um, well, what I wanted to ask around that was, when you fit in, you were seen for who you were and supported, and then all of a sudden you weren't again. Was that painful? Was that
Oh,
hard? Do you think it triggers anything in you from, I guess, life being neurodivergent and that world of that doesn't understand you? Or do you feel you're at a place now where you could navigate that better?
no, I don't believe. I don't think that ever goes away. I think if you're not the right fit culturally, or the culture isn't the right fit for you, then then it's always going to be extremely difficult. And you know, if the organization is not of a mind to make adaptation or to think about, it's not even thinking about neurodivergent people, it's just thinking about people really.
Yes, human.
And you know, we're all different. So and you know, part of the process of management is understanding what the motivations of a particular individual are. You know, I used to work with actually twice I worked with a guy who's I'm not sure he was a little bit ADHD maybe, but a chef. But he was a real reflector, and when we were in a corporate environment, he needed time to process things, and it was difficult for people to appreciate that in that sort of fast-paced corporate environment. And so I would do the whole thing of saying, just wait, let him process it, let him take his time, and then he can come out. Because usually he'd come out with some sort of absolutely killer analysis of whatever we were talking about, but he needed the time to process that. Just recognizing that, you know, understanding how people's minds work is for me it's a fundamental of management. And you
Yes.
know, the notion that you can just push, put pressure on people, demand. This is not going to work. Not these days. It's people are too savvy, and so migrate to cultures that is a better fit for them eventually.
Absolutely, because there's more choice now, isn't there, than before? You know, you kind of were committed to the one company because you were
Yeah,
limited. Whereas now the choices are there, and like you did, you just said, you know what, this isn't fitting me anymore. It's not. I think looking at it, it's not fitting me anymore, as opposed to I don't fit in. Is a better way to look at it. And you went
yeah,
to find somewhere that fits you again,
yeah,
and to be that leader.
yeah.
Have you? Sorry.
No, I was going to say, and now when you know when for instance I left this position and was joining another organization, one of the crucial things was how that culture came across and whether it be a right fit for me. And I had that very open discussion with. It was a very small company, and it was a startup company. It was great actually. Uh, and when one of the principals said to me, you know, he said, I just got to that age where I don't want to work with people I don't like anymore. And I thought, yeah, nailed it, sunshine. That was, you're my kind of guy. You know, that sort of environment where you can be totally honest and open with each other, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Is there any initiative that you've been part of in your career that you would say is neurodivergent affirming, or anything you've seen in other organisations that you thought, oh, this is incredible, and you know, more people should do this?
Well, I think, I, in short, no. I mean, I don't think I think we're at the very infancy of discussing mental health generally and neurodivergency specifically in the workplace. I think it's great that you've got people like Heston Blumenthal and Vanessa D'Souza coming out and being totally upfront and saying this is who I am. You know, it is that sort of greatest showman, this is me type scenario, and be proud and be vocal about it because I have a lot to offer. And you know, unfortunately, the as I say, the corporate world is so entwined with dishonesty and deceit that because we're all trying to put on this great show, that that we whatever we say about diversity, we don't pay heed to it really. You know, I had a conversation with we've got a great thing going at the moment about diversity, and they were talking about getting the number of women in leadership positions, and I was like, yeah, but there's more to diversity than gender. And by the way, you haven't tackled the root challenges behind gender diversity very well. So I think the corporate world needs to look long and hard at itself and be open with itself rather than just go through this box ticking exercise of saying, oh, wouldn't it be good if we had this percentage of? It's just nonsense. It's like
Yeah.
deal with it. I can't remember who it was. It was a rugby coach hearing interviewed the other day, and he was talking about let's not focus on outcome issues. Let's focus on what creates the outcomes. Um, and in the corporate world, we have this tendency to focus on outcomes, um, and that's not how you deal with things. I mean, it's just as simple, and it's just an indicator. An outcome is an indicator of what you've done in the past. So you've got to get that right, and if you don't get the root causes sorted out in the diversity debate, then forget it. I mean, the one of the things that I'm constantly banging on about in the workplace at the moment is women going through the perimenopause. Well, how do they deal with the corporate environment? It's an absolute nightmare for them. You're dealing with it's almost like being autistic. You're dealing with anxiety, self-doubt, and all sorts of things. So it kind of resonates with me. But to be in that situation and have to navigate through that is, suddenly in your life
Yeah.
is got to be an absolute nightmare. And yet we do nothing for it. We do absolutely nothing for it.
Absolutely. And look, and it's never to take away. I think people don't realize men go through a lot of hormonal changes too. Maybe
Yeah.
are there just a lot more. But thank you for mentioning that. Thankfully, I'm not in perimenopausal stage at the moment or yet. But a lot of women, and I appreciate you bringing that up because just in case the audience isn't aware, that a lot of women are getting diagnosed when they're perimenopausal with autism because it's the hormonal fluctuations where the mask slips and we can't keep up the performance anymore. We just can't manage the internal sensory overload. So with autism, and hopefully when I get to that stage, I'll have navigated something to be able to manage. But for me, hormonal stages in my life were very, very challenging, big fluctuations and changes. And the research around women and autism, as we know, is really in its infancy stages. That's where we are with knowing that. So even neurotypically wise, going through perimenopause is quite the challenge.
Mm.
When you've autism as well, or autism as part of your identity, it's a whole other ball game that we really don't understand.
Yeah.
So thank you for raising that.
No, I think it's just about awareness of people, isn't it? And awareness of the struggles people go through on a day-to-day basis. And I think the more that we can introduce that into the workplace and for me the corporate world is the bigger challenge. I think in the hospitality business, in a hotel environment, in a restaurant environment, it's easier to do because you're mindful of, one of the things that actually chefs talk about when they make this move to a head chef position or owning their own business is suddenly I've got to start thinking about other people's problems. Well, yeah, welcome to management.
Yes.
That's what you've got. That's what you spend most of your time to. Can I pull the strings enough to make sure that that person is going to perform at their optimum for the longest period of time? So that's a really really important part of it. And if something is affecting the way that person is performance, be it depression, perimenopause, pregnancy, whatever it is, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Something that's upsetting your neurological balance is going to affect your performance. Now, you can either get upset about, there's a manager, you can get upset about that and start ranting and raving, or you can just accept the reality that it is and try and work with it and make sure that you make necessary adjustments for the people. And if you look at Richard Sandoval is a really good example of this. I don't know whether it exists um, in in their corporate organization, but I was having dinner in a Toro restaurant, and I was talking to the server who was just amazing. I mean, this guy was just incredible. He was just telling stories, and he was on fire. He was on show, and I said to him, the writing should have been on the wall for me then, but I said to him, how do you how do you keep it up? What happens when you're having a down day? He said, when we're not on the money, he said, we take a day off and we cover for each other because we need to be absolutely optimally performing to make this work. And that is so interesting to be able to manage that. So that idea of saying, I'm not going to be able to do it. Or, you know what, move me to a back of house job. I just want to, I don't know, I just want to wash dishes. I just want to do some paperwork today, whatever it is, because I cannot face the outside world today. Or indeed, yeah, just take a day off.
And that's incredible to have that support within the organization. Like that's a real tribe that they have there that I'll take up today, you do tomorrow. Like
Yeah.
that's incredible to have in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely essential when your job is about performance. I mean, almost sort of theatrical performance. That is what we do in the hospitality business. We are in the performance game, and you've got all these. There are loads of hotels that they don't do it so much because it's just a bit of a cliche, but they used to have notices on the rear of the door as you go front of house, which would say "Smile, you're going on stage," and um, and
True.
that is what it was, or that is what it is, and if you're not able to deliver that on any particular moment, adjustments should be made.
Yeah.
But we and as I say, at a hotel level, I think it's better, significantly better than it was, and there's a real understanding there. The corporate environment, I don't think so.
Well, yeah, and but you would want it to be there for the hotel staff and within food and beverages because they're expected to create this atmosphere for the customer. So,
Mm.
it should be both ways. You're expecting the best. How do you feel, or have you any ideas in the corporate world of what changes could be made that would actually let people be human and not have to be robotic? Would that be the best way to describe?
Yeah, I think that there needs to be more conversation about the individual with the individual, uh, and for all we talk about, oh yeah, we go through performance management, development dialogue, whatever you want to call them, but they are largely not brilliant exercises. Depends on the quality of your boss, really. Um, but to be open and have that conversation of what do you need? What do you want? I have one of my colleagues, one of my team who's is we work together for so long. I pretty much know what she needs all the time, and but we've only really in the last couple of years got to the stage of having very open conversations of you know you're feeling down, just go home, just stop, and or go and take a walk or do something else. What is it that would make you happy today, um, or less unhappy? I think is probably the case. But so it is difficult, and when you've got, I'm not saying there's a magic wand to it, and when you're full on under pressure and trying to deliver against whatever the latest crazy project is, then um, you tend to neglect the individual's needs. Um, but I think the more you can talk about them informally as well as formally, I think the better. And I think it's really good to call out people and say, oh yeah, they need that. They need to be sat in a corner because put them in an open room, they're going to feel uncomfortable, and so they're not going to perform optimally. So let's think about what the individual needs, and this whole thing about the flexibility of working from home. You know, the vast majority of people are significantly more productive working from home because they don't like the chaotic environment that's going on. Particularly now we have um, these ridiculous open offices everywhere where people think that this sort of it's all about co-creation. No, not maybe for 10% of the people in there. But again, one of my colleagues loves to have people around her. She gets, if she's in a group of desks that the other people are not there, then she'll go and find other people, which is, that's how she works. That's what she needs. That's fantastic. It doesn't apply to everyone, and you just have to understand that.
I couldn't agree more. And just as you're saying that, it's really interesting to me because I crave like someone beside me working. I'm not working with them. I just see them working, and it
Mm.
motivates me to work. But other times I need complete isolation, silence,
Yeah,
and headphones, and that depends. But somewhere that's when I say I need someone beside me, I don't need this big open office space, bright lights, because that's real sensory overload for me.
yeah,
But having someone nearby sometimes can be comforting. It depends what if I'm in a workflow, and it depends what part's taking over. If it's a little bit of more of my autism and I'm more in a workflow, or if it's kind of the ADHD aspect, it helps me maybe focus a little bit more when someone else is around, strangely enough.
mm,
Um, but again, that's to each individual, and the nuances of neurodivergence is just because you have a diagnosis, I still feel that you still have to know the individual, and that still goes back to what you said earlier, is it's about people, it's about knowing them.
mm,
We don't need labels. The labels, I think, are around to build understanding and conversations. But I think what you said is important is knowing a human and helping them work towards their strengths. So maybe someone's a real people person, let them be the people person. But
yeah,
the other person does all amazing work in the background, but that's where they're happy, and they don't need that interaction.
yeah.
Um, so it's I'd actually had a conversation with someone yesterday, and they were saying that someone they know who is a CEO, they said they're definitely so uncomfortable socially speaking. You can see it within them, and it's like, why do we have to push ourselves to be in them places? You can do as many coaching classes to be able to public speak. Of course you can, but if that is a real discomfort that you're putting yourself into, and then you're dysregulated for days after, is it worth it?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean this is, and again, if I look at that corporate world thing, there's that great thing about let's get you out of your comfort zone. Why? Why do you want to get me out of my comfort zone? I'm not comfortable there, and I'm not going to perform for you. I used to have this, as I say, he was a great boss, but he liked to take us on activities up a mountainside, and he said it's all about getting you out of your comfort zone. I said, okay, but this is your comfort zone. This is not mine. I said, well, next time, let's go to the pub. We'll have a few pints of beer and I'll give you a packet of cigarettes to smoke and we'll see how you feel out of your comfort zone. And to be fair, he was quite an intelligent man. He reflected on it and he said, you're right. You're absolutely right. So, it's just corporate cliche tends to get in the way of things from time to time. And if we can consider that, then I think it will make everyone's lives much much easier. But that whole thing of playing to the strengths, I used to be a hotel general manager several times, and one of my first gigs was all about raising the profile of the hotel. It was struggling a wee bit, and we had to get out, we had to socialize, we had to be, or I had to socialize, I had to be out in the city and making sure everyone knew that what we were about as a hotel. And this, for me, was just like hell on earth. So I took a wingman with me. I had the wingman, and I made sure, and we then started having a good laugh going out all the time. But it worked because
Yeah.
we made an adjustment, because if I'd just gone out into this networking type environment, it would have just been hell on earth. and I wouldn't have done it very well either. So, sometimes you need to make those little tweaks, those little adjustments that will allow you to deliver. So you can, you don't have to be pigeonholed in a particular role or a particular job just because it fits with your neurological state. You can go out of that, but you need those adjustments made. And it's the same with, I have conversations with, hilariously, we always get chefs as part of their recruitment process to go through some sort of numeracy testing. I don't understand why, and the results are, 9 times out of 10 they're disastrous. And then it leads to a conversation about, quite often, about dyslexia, very prevalent in kitchen environment. And so, but why do you need someone to be good with numbers? Yes, you need them to produce financial results, but you want them for a whole host of other reasons. So don't try and create a five-legged sheep. Let's actually look at the situation where we can say, okay, this guy is terrible with numbers, so let's make sure they have the support on that. Let their creativity fly. It's not a difficult thought process, but as I say, we're just trying to get into this sort of the box ticking exercise of making sure that we're covering everyone's competencies. Everyone has to be the same.
Mm-hmm. All fit into the one box, which we certainly do not. And I love that example of having someone there by your side. It creates a whole different situation. And you have that support. And it is about just building them supports where needed. There's other areas where you need no support, and you thrive. But to create roles for people where they have supports where needed and not necessary. And that one, about numbers, and that goes back to school. Like I have big issues with the schooling system and why we can't go in the direction we naturally flow in, because some people have natural abilities in art, others have natural abilities in numbers. Why they can't, I know we have to learn other aspects of the curriculum to a degree, but I think there should be more time allocated for the areas that are our natural abilities, because that's the way we're supposed to go, I feel, anyway.
Yeah, I think the whole personalization piece is just as important in education. In fact, more important in education than in everyday life. So yeah, absolutely.
If you could orchestrate the corporate world you're in, what would you do if you had that power?
I would have dialogue. I think it's really as simple as that. Understanding what and it's not about me. It's about everyone. Is understanding what it is that motivates you. Do you feel, if you're being, I don't know, just to use sort of cliche type thing, are you being badgered on a timeline for delivering something? Does that get you going? Does that give you the motivation that you need to do it? A particular task, or or does that just send you into an absolute frenzy and complete meltdown? So having the discussions about what are the management techniques that we put in play, how do they make you feel? And
Very powerful.
I think if you can have those conversations, I think a degree of training, I think would be very useful in most organizations to actually understand what people are going through. There was a great thing on LinkedIn a few years ago, which was just a shot of a guy in a shower, sort of curled up into a little ball of like, the thought of having to go to work and dealing with the anxiety on a daily basis. And, understanding that that's how people feel, understanding that some people want to come and talk to you about, whatever it was they watched on television last night. And there's the other person might be saying, I don't care. I'm not interested in whatever it is your world is. But that's important to them. So it's not a one-sided thing. It has to be it's like a swinging pendulum in terms of reaction to people's needs and desires. But the more you talk about it, then the more aware people are going to become, and the more tolerant people are going to become. That is going to make people feel more comfortable in any workplace. And if people are more relaxed and comfortable, then they deliver more. It's just a proven thing. If they're under pressure and wound up all the time, they're not going to deliver. And, you know, I can look back on times in my career where you're stressed or under pressure, and the delivery rate is significantly lower. And you have this complete, you know, stress causes complete body shutdown. You know, that's fact. Well, then why put people under stress then? You know, it's just, it doesn't make any sense. So, and then when you put it into neurodivergent terms, we carry this baggage all the time. So, you know, we put stress on ourselves. We cause anxiety. You know, when I was 7, I used to have a worry list, and so you know, that's just how people are in this sort of state. And you know, there was a great one with I don't know if you know Nicky Campbell, who was used to do the breakfast show on BBC 5 Live, and he was interviewing someone, and they said, do you ever get that situation where you just look at yourself in the mirror and say you're an idiot? And he said, every single day. And that's, if you have that sort of mentality, then actually you need to be built up all the time. And so you need to make sure that the people around you understand that you need that reassurance, you need that praise. Most people do, to be fair, but it's particularly prevalent in a neurodivergent situation because you just have such incredibly low self-esteem generally. So, and you know, you mask it with self-deriding humor, but nevertheless, it's there. It's always going to stick with you. If people are aware of that, then it'll be so much easier.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it's really important to say there that self-esteem that is not there because you're neurodivergent. That self-esteem issue is there because you grew up in a world that expected you to be something you weren't. So you always felt a misfit, abnormal, guessing what normal was or what people would like. And I think in today's world, as children are growing up, if they're allowed to be their authentic selves and not, you know, try to fit them into what societal norms is, I don't think them self-esteem issues would exist. It's going to for some people. There's other impacts, but so I'm not saying neurodivergent or neurotypical, but I'm saying if you give an individual, back to what we said at the beginning, an opportunity to be themselves, them to be known for who they are, then I think that self-esteem issue is not going to be an issue in the future, or not nearly as much.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting observation. I hadn't thought of it like that, but it does make absolute sense that you're so suppressed all the time,
Yeah.
that it completely shapes you. Yeah, but if you, and you know, my daughter is you know, when she was at school, she surrounded herself with. I guess it must happen sort of naturally that neurodivergent people attract each other, but really in a very refreshingly self-confident way of saying this is who we are, and you know, fuck you type thing. Sorry, excuse my language, but it's and it was great to see. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I just hadn't thought of it like that.
I'm sure your attitude towards yourself will have impacted her feeling like being able to do that, you know, where you are showing vulnerability and honesty, because I can't imagine it's easy, Philip. Like, I personally know that me putting myself on camera, or, you know, I know we said like leaning into discomfort, I definitely am. And public speaking for me is, the build up and then the aftermath. But like that, if you said if someone was on stage with me, I would feel more calm. And in fact, I always have my daughter with me in some way, whether it's a hair bobbin or a photo. And that is what that's also almost my support. Well, it is my support because it's the world I want her. Not that I know her neurotype. I just don't want individuality to be an issue when she grows up. I just want people to be allowed to be who they are.
Yeah.
But I think your daughter wouldn't feel that confidence to be able to do that unless she had that parenting to support her individuality.
Um, maybe. I mean, yeah, I don't want to take the credit for anything, but I think what one of the things that we've done as a family is have these conversations that I was talking about, to make sure that my wife goes into a restaurant and the first thing that she's doing is sort of scouring the room to see where everyone is going to feel comfortable. And so how can she make that as a neurotypical person? It must be, well, it is, she tells me it is exhausting, but she is constantly looking for safe space, for safe places, for all of us. So, but we talk about that. And it's relatively recent, but we have those conversations, and and so then that gets to a situation because it's not always about accepting, and because sometimes we can say the most outrageous things which are just not acceptable, and so having a neurotypical wife is great in that respect. You can say you are just out of order, and no, that's not. You're not going to do. So again, having that sort of constant back and forth is really useful, and I think that has helped my daughter in her journey a little bit, and she seems to be thriving. So
Well, yeah, and that isn't that amazing that she's had that upbringing of acceptance and understanding.
mm,
And what you're doing within your family network there is exactly what you said within the corporate world needs to happen is everyone just to speak about how they're feeling, what's going on, and being honest,
yeah,
without judgment. And that that's the way we try to work our family here. And not to say we get it right all the time. I mean, you've two neurodivergent brains sometimes, and it's the executive dysfunction. But it's the fact that we hold ourselves accountable, and we can we can say, look, this has come out, and I'm going to reflect on it, and naming feelings um, really helps us understand. So it sounds like the way you navigate your family at home naturally flows into to work for you. Would that be
well, I think in
correct?
terms of my peers, I think recently, yeah, I think, but I think I've always had conversations with people about how they're feeling and what does it for them, because I see that as a responsibility as a manager. So yeah, in that respect, I think I've got a gained knowledge of people as we've been progressing and understanding what their triggers are, what the strings are, so that again, no altruism here. It's always about optimal performance. Um, so, but in terms of discussing my own uh, um, challenges, let's call them that, with a peer group, I think is a relatively recent step forward for me, and I'm much more overt about things than I used to be, and whether it's paying dividends, I don't know. Time will tell. As I say, it's only a relatively recent thing. To get up on stage and say I am neurodivergent it shouldn't be such a big deal, but it was, and it's that whether that's an indictment of me or of the corporate world, I'm not absolutely sure. But anyway, the point is that I do talk about it more. I refer to my family life, and also I'm quite forthcoming about saying, that doesn't work for me, or this is not a good place for me to be at the moment. So I'm getting more comfortable in doing that, and I think perhaps the family situation has helped that. But yeah, it would be good
It's
to.
incredible to be able to advocate for yourself, because I think that's something people really or really find really challenging, is to be able to advocate for yourself. I know me knowing about my neurodivergence has allowed me to be able to, because I understand myself on a much deeper level. Um, but what I was going to ask you with that, I know you said on stage you're talking about your neurodivergence. And I'm only asking this, I guess, personally, because I feel I can talk, I'm better able to talk in where there's not that I'm comfortable talking publicly, but I'm better able to explain my neurodivergence to a lot of people as opposed to one to one.
Yeah.
I kind of just go back into that little shell.
Yeah. Most definitely. It's and look, that applies to pretty much everything. As I'm much more comfortable in a group situation than a one-to-one situation. Again, it's important for people to understand that.
Yeah.
I was effectively addressing a group of 20 people day before yesterday, and it was like a gig for me. It was got a couple of laughs as well, so that was the main thing. But it is that whole thing of I'm with this group, I'm addressing them, I'm explaining to them what we're trying to achieve, and I'm comfortable with that. Get me to do it in front of my boss, disaster, absolute disaster. So yeah, I completely understand that one.
And do you think it's just with your boss, or would it be with a coworker? Would you find it difficult with a coworker or a friend, or is it maybe more like authority that's an issue?
I think, yeah, I think that's a good question. Yeah, no, I think it generally in a one-to-one basis anyway is significantly more difficult. I mean, I think we're sort of famously known for having small groups of friends, and so you can open up to really close people, but generally you're not going to do that, and you're more inclined to listen to their challenges, their problems than I
Absolutely.
say my office I think has become a bit of um, a couch session. So, but it's great, if people feel comfortable enough opening up to me, then I'm delighted with that. That's a good thing as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you look. I know when people do you do, obviously it elicits positive feelings because you're able to help someone in that given moment. I also feel hearing someone else's story, it grounds you. I don't know if you've felt it, but I definitely would have had felt a lot of victimization, like I'm a victim. And that took work to kind of grow out of
Mm.
that poor me. Whereas when you hear other people, you realize that everybody in this world is going through struggles. They might look on the outside as if everything's great, but internally we all have our own pain, no matter what our neurotype. So when have that presence that people feel comfortable coming to you, I think that is a rare gift, and one to be celebrated, especially when you're a leader.
Yeah, I mean I get tremendous satisfaction out of it. As I say, if people start opening up to me, then it's great. That my job is done, and particularly as you say, if they're someone that is either directly or indirectly reporting to me, then it's really gratifying. Absolutely.
Outside of, I know you mentioned earlier that you have a wonderful co-worker who you have each other's back, which it seems to be consistent within our talk. Is it's always a support system, with that person in the restaurant, you going out and talking to a group of people when you were general manager, and where you are now. Is just having that support system. Outside of her, do you feel that your role can be a lonely place?
Sorry, do I feel what?
Your role where you are, it can be a
Mm.
lonely place. It can be isolating, or
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually well, no, yeah, again, there's that sort of corporate competition, which is difficult to deal with, and you're constantly, and this is not just me. This is as I say, I speak to a lot of people about this, who feel sort of constantly under pressure and as if they're being judged or whatever it is. I think that in the hotel business, the role of general manager is one of the loneliest positions. I have to say it's quite an easy gig, but it is one of the loneliest positions. And I was traveling in India, and a group of general managers had set up a lunch for me, which was really nice of them, and we were just sort of chewing. In fact, it was a Saturday as well, and I said, "Do you guys, how do you let off steam in that lonely position of being a hotel general manager?" And they say, "We do this." And so I was like, "Well, that makes sense. So long as you have that outlet, so long as you have the ability to not be on show all the time, to be able to sort of let the guard down a little bit, and say it's okay." But I also find that it's worthwhile being human with people,
Yes.
and just saying, I make mistakes or whatever. I dropped the ball here, or I'm feeling like shit today, or whatever it is. Just be human,
Yeah.
and that and again, that makes for a more relaxed working environment.
I
So
couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Everybody works better when you have that honesty and that vulnerability. I really, really think that is so true.
yeah, yeah. So,
So back to your family life. How do you navigate neurodivergent and neurotip? Well, how do you navigate life? Being a neurodivergent father and having neurodivergent children, and how did that journey feel? I guess initially when diagnosis entered your door, if that's even a right phrase, but I'm sure people will get what I mean. I tend
yeah,
to use phrases maybe a bit of one phrase and a bit of another, but look, that's me. So
yeah. I mean, it's. I think that there's an element of relief that came about with di diagnosis from one daughter, and then another one is effectively self-diagnosed, and she talks very openly about it. She's in education herself, so she's really interested in how neurodivergence manifests itself in the classroom type environment. So, but we're new on this road. It's only been in the last few years, and so which is uh, which is I guess tragic. No, it's good that we've got that. It's good that we have these discussions. I think it makes it considerably easier for my. I wouldn't say easier. No, that's the wrong word. I think there's more realization from my neurotypical wife who needs to or understands that she's got a bunch of people around her who are just not on her wavelength at all, and she's got to the stage now of saying, I understand that this is not my safe space. This is not. So actually, I need to find another place from time to time. I need to be to get out of the house, go and see her family, whatever it is, so that she doesn't have to to deal to manage us all the time. So I think that's been a real positive that's come out of it. And we of course don't get it right all the time, but at least having those conversations and saying, you know, just need a bit of space from you at the moment is pretty good. So yeah, I think
And
that's
even I mean, it's very powerful to say that. I think because her being able to have that honesty and saying, "Look, I need to get out of the house to have my own safe space, because it's not here right now. And nobody taking that as rejection, knowing that, there's a lot going on right now, and I guess understanding, because I know myself, even last night, I had such a busy day and a lot of face-to-faces. I was just mentally burned out. And my husband said, "Oh, you're going to come when I finished work, you're going to come and we'll watch something on the sofa." And I was just like, need to, just need to go inside. It's like 9 o'clock at night. I was like, I need to not have another. And I love him so much. And usually that's a lovely thing to do. But the rare occasion we get to do it now with a young child. But I just needed to be able to get out and have air and breathe, and because I was so dysregulated, I probably didn't manage my cup very well, and the craving, the socializing, and not taking into the fact that probably I oversensory thought, which led to probably dysregulation. But I knew in that moment I just needed some time to myself. And, to be able to say that, and because that's not something I would have been able to do. I would have felt, oh, yeah, okay, I'm coming. Because we should be sitting as a couple together and spending this rare opportunity together. But if I did that, that would have just added to that cup, and it would have overflowed in a couple of days, and I wouldn't have even known where it stemmed from. Whereas when I was working, I was like, okay, that's enough. I'm building. I'm still at a point sometimes of not catching it in time, but I try. But yeah, I think it's lovely to have that family system where nobody feels rejected, that we all need our own time. Like at the moment, we're juggling each other. You've a big house there of people who might have sensory issues or going on, and they could be different. Like mine's very auditory, whereas that's not for my husband. He'll have the TV going very loud and the radio, and that's.
Oh my God. No. I mean, it's really interesting because, again, as I say, well, recent journey, but what was considered sort of strange behaviour now becomes accepted, even with our extended family, with my wife's family particularly, who we all spend Christmas together usually, and it's really loud, and we can't all deal with that, and so we either, as we did in the past, explode, and there would be some sort of something that would ruin the day, or it would be now we have a complete understanding where if it's just too much, just take yourself away for an hour and just let it all calm down. And so understanding those pressures that we're all under is whether neurodivergent or typical, it is I think is half the battle, and just the ability to talk about them has been really useful.
Yeah, and I think knowing, learning them takes time. Because some of you're not fully connected with yourself. It does take that little bit of time.
Yes.
When you're saying that about Christmas, you make me think of my mother. She's the master. Actually, my mother and my older brother, they just slip away. You don't even know they've just slipped away. Whereas I'm like, I'm just going to have to go now, but I'll be.
I'm going to announce my departure.
Yes, where I need to just slip away. That's nobody notices, nobody cares. I'm not letting anyone down by doing that. So so yeah, that sounds like an ideal Christmas. Ideal Christmas for me is in pajamas all day, very quiet, and not having to perform to anyone for anyone. I'll do the days around it. What is there one bit of advice you would want to give to leaders on how to, I guess, navigate life themselves and the workplace? What would you think would be a real bit of advice that you would have loved early on, or do you think that would really benefit leaders out there?
I think it's sort of don't sweat the small stuff thing. I think we're trying to control things all the time, and we're trying to make sure not everyone. That's something that I don't tar people with the same brush, but we're uh, particularly those of us that are sort of very detail obsessed in a leadership role can be very frustrating for people we're working with, and sometimes you have to make the allowance on people that work with you and for you that they're not going to get things to your incredible high level of expectation all the time, and that's okay. It's fine. But also, you're not going to achieve that yourself either, because your expectations will be so high that you'll sort of work yourself into an early grave by trying to achieve all of this all the time. And sometimes you need to just step back and say, you know what, this is okay. This is good enough, and
Yeah.
good enough is sometimes better than perfection.
Well,
Um,
does perfection exist? Can we
Now,
measure
that's the whole point, but it's the
it?
striving for that. Um,
And who
that
who determines what it is?
Absolutely, yes, and just think about what you're making sure your goals are clear about. What are you trying to achieve here? What is good enough look like as an outcome based thing. Fine, okay, that's the indicator of it.
Yeah.
But actually, let's concentrate on all the things that we need to put in place, and that could be simply, making sure people are happy. Let's do everything about that. One of the hotels that I was involved in, we spent a lot of time talking about culture and what we want to be known as a group, so that we could almost call ourselves out on it when we
Yeah.
weren't delivering about that. And we spent more time on that than on any other part of the business. And as a result, the outcomes were really, really positive. We were a phenomenally successful business. Um,
Wow.
but we didn't really, it was almost that the outcomes were at the end of the year, we've done this, happy days, let's go and do it all again next year. And so yeah, for me, I think that people should be more tolerant, and I'm not, if anyone knew me, would listen to me, they would sort of laugh in my face. But so I'm not saying that I'm perfection from this, far from it. But one of the things I have learnt over the years is you just cannot have your expectations need to be more tolerant
Hmm.
of your own and other people's uh, shortfalls.
Absolutely, but yeah, and I suppose especially in the neurodivergent world, because we do have them different minds, so we might never be able to meet that individual standard, but our standard is very high in another area. And I do wonder sometimes, but is that need or that seeking that perfectionism, is that because we never felt enough, so we're always seeking that enoughness? The perfection that doesn't exist. Are we always chasing an unattainable, unavailable goal? That kind of feeds that self-esteem. It's we still haven't got there. It could be better. It could, and I know that's a driving force too. Things have positives and negatives, but the enoughness, I think, is the one to highlight. There is when is enough good enough?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's there's a word in Swedish, lakum or something like that, which means enough, just enough. That enoughness that you talk about, which I think is a wonderful philosophy to have in life. Um, but we do all sort of hanker for more, hanker for more, hanker for more, and if we're achieving for our customers and our colleagues, then who cares?
Yeah.
There is an element of it is good enough, and okay, you've got to be dynamic and you've got to move forward all the time, but that comes with the next development. Okay, let's look at this. Let's see, you know, again, to go back to this this hotel that I was talking about before, you know, actually the same reflector guy came into my office one day and he said, he said, I've been thinking. I said, you're always thinking, Richard, so no problem there. And he said, are we becoming complacent? I'm like, that's a brilliant question. You know, we were a successful business.
Yeah.
We were winning awards. We were doing well in our peer group, and so we then did a group away day with that as the single agenda point. Are we becoming complacent? And it was really great to be sort of totally introspective from a business point of view and from a team and a group of and an individual perspective, and really to address that issue, because then you get to the next stage of say, okay, in actual fact, the conclusion was no, we weren't, but you know, what we wanted to do was say, well, okay, but we're looking at this next. We've got this improvement plan for that, and we're doing that. So we could justify ourselves by saying no, we're not, but we've still got to move forward all the time. But it was a really interesting, reflective point that kind of sat with me throughout my whole career. So enoughness is great, absolutely, and we should really strive for that. But equally, we need to think of the next gig that's going to put a smile on our face, and really put a smile on our face is almost more important than the outcome, the business outcome on it.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because you know when it is enough, and it's maybe hard to balance, because even when you look at your own personal work, like you don't get to a point of just going, okay, that's me now. I'm enough now, so I'm not going to do any more work on myself, or I'm not going to whatever it is, go to the gym or eat healthy, or you know, I'm enough now. That's probably self-neglect, so maybe not a good example, but you know, there is always that we're still evolving and working towards things. It's, I guess, without the huge pressure and stress around it. Like what you said there, it's more, you know, you're working together. It's not necessarily about the outcome.
No.
It's just about growing.
Yeah.
And what about for parents? So for parents who themselves may be neurodivergent, for parents parenting neurodivergent children and neurotypical, is there any advice you would like to give?
In terms of, well, again, I think the expectation thing is really important, and you know, one of the things that you know, I again don't profess to be a perfect parent by any stretch, but one of the things that we've always imparted, and that children have said they appreciate this, is that we don't put pressure on them, because we know that they're not going to result that it's not going to result in a good situation. So, you know, whatever you want to do, whatever makes you happy, that's the main thing. And we never have a discussion about academic results or anything. You know, if they're good, great, well done, super. But we'll never say you must try hard and you have to do that, because it's not going to achieve anything with it. So, you know, what the trick is, as you said earlier, you know, understanding what it is where their métier lies, you know, where their skill set will be, and trying to coax them, guide them, encourage them in a particular direction, simply because you can see the sort of person they are. Not to force it upon them.
Yeah.
Just to give them the opportunities of say, you know, here's something that you're really good at, you really enjoy. You know, again, to look back on to look at my 18-year-old, you know, she's funnily enough obsessed with sound, so it's just a big surprise there. And so she's going to do music technology. She's done music technology for the last, you know, she loves music. She loves music production. And so, you know, it's a perfect fit for her. And so we've just encouraged it and just actively said, you know, do that. That's what you love. That's what you're good at. So go for it. If it doesn't work out, then do something else. And I think having that sort of again openness and reduction of expectation, I think is yeah, is I just think it's a more positive way of living.
Yeah.
And if I look at, not that my parents were particularly pressurizing, but when I said I wasn't going to do law at university and I wanted to, and then when I said I wanted to go into hospitality, it was like, why would you do that? It's a terrible thing. You're condemning yourself to fail. Well, it's not worked out too badly. So I think personal happiness is so much more important than some sort of bizarre perception of career success, which is unhealthy in so many ways, and it creates so much mental stress on people.
Yeah. You have your children to protect them, and I think when you face the world around you, you don't want them feeling like you felt like that. That is definitely why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I just, when you're talking, because literally yesterday my husband said, Máire, I don't know, should we be doing a bit more now with Sienna, with she's only a toddler, and I know where he's going, a bit more educational things with her. And I just said, no, I don't believe, because one, children learn better through play, and she'll naturally start speaking. She's naturally started counting. She's doing that without pressure, and that is the way I want her. We both want that. We've talked about the types of schools, etc. But there is that, I think, external pressure sometimes that comes in from other parents, which you think, oh, am I doing the right thing? Should I?
Absolutely, and there is that, you hear of these sort of child geniuses, and of course people give the list of accolades of their children, and I never get into that game, and I just like, well, great, good, super, well done them, but I don't want to play this competition game, because it's not useful for any of us.
Absolutely.
And I will, of course, I love my children dearly, and I'll talk about their successes and everything, but not in a competitive way of just saying, oh, she did a really cool thing, or whatever
Yeah.
it is, and that's the reward that I get out of it. And it doesn't really matter what other people think, with it. It's our space, not anyone else's.
Yes, and I love that. I really love that, because judgment is something that I feared my whole life, and now, and I will bring my husband back into this. He's the first person, well, not the first person I ever met, but definitely not. There's something about him which he's never cared what other people have thought, and he's always met people and taken them for who they were straight off, with no judgment. He has such a wide variety of different friends, and I've loved that about him, and it's definitely something that I've learned from him, and I'm grateful for. But that thing of not comparing and just letting them be, like, for me, Sienna having such incredible mental health is the most important thing for me. And if she'll find her way. Like, my dad was so worried about me. My older brother was the academic. School did not suit me. The attention wasn't there. But when I self-studied, when I went to university, that's where I flourished and found my way. But he always says to me now, he's like, I was so worried about what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas now, knowing what he knows, he said, I wish I knew back then. I guess it wasn't a topic then. It wasn't things that people talked about. But he was like, I was really worried about where you were going to go or what was going to happen.
That's really interesting. Actually, some friends of my parents said to me, and just a few years ago, and they said, you've done really well in your career. And I was like, it's fine, and said, because we were all really worried about you earlier on. I'm like, really? Really? There was this discussion about, why wasn't I invited to that meeting? Jesus Christ. But no, listen. I think we just need to allow people to be people and enjoy themselves. It's a short life, so have some fun. That's the main thing.
Make the road less traveled, the one that's more traveled. Let people take that road.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you today, or anything that you think would be beneficial for the audience?
Well, we didn't touch too much on the sensory overload thing,
Yes, yes.
which is quite a thing. It's certainly quite a thing for me in my job, in terms of how I go about. I don't design, but I'm influencing design of spaces and everything, and I think that is something that will become more and more talked about as we move along. The importance, and okay, in my case, it's about restaurants and bars and the importance of getting lighting and sound right.
Yeah.
But I love this. I love. No, I don't particularly love that. It's interesting for me to see how people react in different spaces based on what is happening from a sensory perspective, and we actually, in terms of the three pillars that we have in one of the brands I work with at the moment, is we talk about, what we're trying to create is an anti-ordinary environment that's theatrical and that's sensorial. And so we spend so much time looking at the sensory perception and the impact of sense on people's perception and people's assessment of their experience, and ergo their willingness to spend money, frankly. So we do a lot of work associated with sound adjustment and the impact on spend, and the same with scent, and influencing buying behavior with scent, simply because you're making a nice environment. Now, when it comes to neurodivergence, that's a real, because we're generally, not everyone, but because we're acutely aware, it matters so much more to us. But the important thing is that and this is going back to the whole sort of recognizing your métier, of utilizing those skills and that awareness to establish environments where everyone, within reason, everyone will feel comfortable in that space. And so that for me has been quite an interesting sort of part of my job, where I've been able to use that neurodivergence to really, really positive effect. People do think I'm weird, but it's okay. That's just
Yeah,
go with it.
absolutely. The best people are.
Indeed.
But and it actually, I because I think I was overexcited about this conversation, because when we did meet before, and I thought it was an amazing bit of advice. That I know you mentioned restaurants, and you really do. Like there are certain restaurants that I feel way more comfortable in than others, and there's places I like the food, but I actually won't go back to because it's just too much for me. The person in front of me is there. I'm having a conversation, but the background starts blurring. There's so much auditory noise and light. It's and not natural light, but fluorescent lights.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that whole thing of, introducing, number of designs I see where they've come up and there's a video screen there, and you're like, or a TV screen, and you're like, why would you do that? You're going to there's flickering going on in the background, and no one's going to enjoy that unless they are completely focused on what's on the screen. And so, in which case, if it's a game, then drop the screen down and show the game, but don't have it going on in the background, because it's just creating absolute brain frenzy, as is poor acoustics. If you've got noise reverberating around, then it's going to be a disaster. If you've got a table for two that's right in the middle of a room, who the hell is going to want to sit there
I know.
unless they're making a movie? So it's what I always find it amusing when you watch a couple in a restaurant in a film, they're always sitting on a table for two in the middle of the restaurant, because obviously from a camera point of view it makes absolute sense,
Yes.
but realistically it doesn't. So, but we still get, we get designs where they've just dropped a table for two in the middle, and you're like, tell me anyone that wants to sit there.
No. Yeah.
And there's a very famous restaurateur in New York called Danny Mayer, and he says it's just make as many corners as you can. Someone said to me the other day, I got 42 corners in this restaurant. I'm like, well done, you.
Yes.
Because we need that. We need that protection. We need that security. And again, that's not a neurodivergent thing. That's a human thing. We People who are neurodivergent are just more acutely aware of it.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
so, uh, you know, but most people will be like, you go into any restaurant and say which is the best, which is the most favorite table, and it'll be the curved booth in the corner.
Yeah.
One, it's curved, human, we like that, and two, it's in the corner, and that will be everyone's favorite table. So there was a restaurant that I used to work in years ago in Glasgow, and we had this curved booth in the corner that actually had its back to, or you could see people coming into the restaurant, but their backs would be to you, so you were watching the back of them. So it was like the ideal place for sitting and watching people, and that, of course, was everyone's favorite table.
Yes.
So it's applying all these, as I say, things that you're more acutely aware of into that hospitality environment has been really interesting.
And I think what you're saying there, just it came into my head. A human nature would be our backs protected and we can see any dangers in front of us. But as you also said, neurodivergent, it's like we're hyper aware.
Yeah,
It's different again, back to the nuances that can be very different for different people. But yeah, there's definitely like I guess, which I probably would ask you, is there any neurodivergent superpower you think you have?
oh my God.
Because I was about to say it's almost like a superpower, and it's not. It's. But is there anything that you think? Do you know what? I'm really excellent at that, and that's really shone through my life and made such a difference.
I think I'm pretty good at creative writing, and so I think that's, and again, not untypical of the neurodivergent mind. So that's kind of where I see my strengths. So, I can string a sentence together and enjoy doing that. But unfortunately, I don't get a lot of opportunities to do it. So I'll have to wait for retirement.
There was something that flashed out. No, we discussed before when we met was we kind of mentioned that ADHDers are tend to be exceptional within chaos, emergency rooms and kitchens. And I always notice my husband, if there is any sort of drama or chaos, he's the calmest person in the room and he just knows what to do. But you had mentioned a place, and it's probably better for you to tell the story, that you can hear a pin drop in a kitchen,
Yeah,
which for me was so important because, creativity wise, because the creativity of a chef, to be able to create that illustrated to me that you can create that in any organization, because generally a kitchen in a restaurant, I imagine, is pretty chaotic. So
yeah,
I found it fascinating.
yeah. Look, they are. They used to be more so. They used to be much noisier. And I think there's certainly a marked change now. And the example I was using earlier was 11 Madison Park in New York City, which is, it's a three-star restaurant, former number one restaurant in the world, now a fully plant-based restaurant, amazing experience in there. But I was lucky, I get all these sort of perks of the trade. I was lucky enough to meet Daniel Hum, the owner and chef there, and he took me into the kitchen, showed me around, and it was so ordered and so precise and so quiet, that and that does tend to go with precision or fine dining. That it just that the chaotic environment doesn't suit it because people are trying to be very, very precise. So we have a 3-star Michelin restaurant under William Bradley in San Diego, and I haven't been in his kitchen in service, but I've seen the kitchen, and it's very, very precise, and so I imagine it's pretty not relaxed, but it's quiet, and so we see that a lot more. Um, the idea of shouting and bawling is, something again. I was reflecting to when before I came to talk to you about this, that this idea of sort of blowing out a little bit, which is pretty common in our world, is very common in the hospitality business. So there tends to be sort of like that, but as with the neurodivergent mind, it's quickly forgotten. It's what happened in service stayed in service. So it really suits that mind. You're never going to bear a grudge
Yes.
for a blow up in the middle of service, or the middle of a some sort of high pressured situation in the hospitality business, because it is very like that. You get these extreme peaks where everything is full on, and everything is highly pressured, and then you come down to a more reasonable environment. So I guess that's where the sort of shouting in the kitchen idea came from. But it is one of those things that is just not accepted anymore, and I think people are just just much calmer and much more balanced than they were sort of 20 years ago or 30 years ago when I was starting.
Wow, wow, that is fascinating on how they were able to make them transformations.
Yeah,
And I love the fact that, there's no grudges held. I always remember that with my brothers at football. They'd be playing their best friend on the opposing team or whatever it was, and they'd have, arguments on the pitch, and then off the pitch, it's as if nothing happened.
yeah, yeah.
So
I
yeah,
think rugby is a really good example of that, isn't it? Yeah, absolute all-out war, and then incredible camaraderie off the pitch, which is it is a real family thing, and that's very much like hospitality. Again, when you've been in that situation, when you and so the military example is the ultimate and most extreme example of that. When you've been and you mentioned A&E, another one. You've experienced that adversity, experienced that pressure, then you're bound for life. You are part of that club, and part of that family who has been through that. In that respect, all of these professions that have that are incredibly, incredibly rewarding. But as with the military, as with rugby, another example, mental health is a real challenge, and the more we talk about it, the better. It absolutely will, can promote all these positives about these. Um, I mean, I suppose there are sort of two ways of looking at it. One is that these sort of environments attract that sort of person, and so it's going to be more prevalent for mental health challenges. And there's a lot of talk about it in rugby at the moment. Obviously, with the military, there's a huge amount of discussion about that. But in hospitality, exactly the same. In adversity, occasional blowout, but we're all in this together. We're doing this
yeah,
together.
yeah. Is there, or if you could change to a neurotypical mind, would you choose to do so if you were given that option?
100%.
Would you?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. No, no, no. Oh my God. Yeah. I've often found myself saying, "Would I be like you?" My goodness. So no, yeah. I mean, it's for me, I guess again, to the point you were making earlier, which was real eye-opening one for me, is because it wasn't talked about, because we weren't aware. Then you've lived with this anxiety all your life, and if there'd been much more discussion, if there'd been diagnosis, if there'd been more adjustment and more consideration, then it would have been completely different. But because there wasn't, it wasn't, and so it's I don't want to give the boohoo thing. I've life's not been bad, but
It's a painful experience, though, Philip.
yeah, but it could have been a whole lot
Painful,
easier with
completely different.
fitting in a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you don't have it, because I don't think you'd be where you are today. And I don't think we'd be having this discussion, which I think is definitely needed and important. But I do empathise with the journey, because for anyone out there listening, you really want to try harder. You really want to be able to do the things that other people can do, but nobody can understand what's going on internally for you, unless they've experienced it. It's much like a man can never experience giving birth.
Absolutely, yeah.
You can't know it until you've done it. I could never know until, so you can't know you can't even know what it's like to be a parent. You can never describe that to anyone. You just can't know it until you are one.
Yeah, and again, that's not to give the sort of the sob story thing, because these are just challenges that people face in life, and people face lots of different challenges, as you said earlier. And this is just one of them. The more that we can talk about them, the more that we can say, okay, this is something we've got to be accommodating for. This is something that we can help each other for. Whatever, and it doesn't need to be some sort of neurological setup. It could just, it could be, I don't know, extreme poverty. Whatever it is, this is all adversity, and and we are, despite what that sort of Millite, every man is an egotistical hedonist, there is, in the most part, there is a sense of care in most of us, and if we can promote that, if we can talk about that in this crazy world that we live in more, then we've got a better chance of living together nicely.
I couldn't agree more. Really couldn't agree more. Is there any quote, story, or anything that you've ever experienced that has kind of reshaped your view on inclusion, or on yourself or your children?
I think there's I'm not sure if I've got it actually, but there's the wonderful, Marcelo Bielsa from football manager, football manager, quite a famous football manager.
Some people will know this.
Yeah, they will know.
My husband will know straight away.
He'll definitely know it. Yeah. So he said, whoever is loved will always feel safer and have that sensation of strength that will put him in a superior position to confront the battle. And I'm quite clear in my mind that no one has to feel sincere, that one has to feel sincere love for those he leads. And if he doesn't feel naturally, then he must learn how to feel it. And I think, again, that links to that idea of safety. And, I said to you, the Ocean Rogers line of, all we're trying to do is make people feel safe, happy and sated. And that idea of protection and looking after people, I think is what resonates most with me, and I know a huge number of my colleagues as well. So, if we can get that sort of, it sounds a little bit idealistic, but that sense of care, then the world will be a much better place.
It really would. It really would. And I think the point that kept coming up was that support network, that group, that tribe, and we've developed into such an individualistic society, which I believe is a lot of our mental health issues, is that we don't have that support anymore. And I think it's getting back to that vulnerable state, and authenticness is so important. And particularly, I do feel that leaders feel they need to perceive themselves in a certain way to the outside world. And when they're able to show vulnerability, it makes such a difference to everyone around them. And it does naturally build that team camaraderie. Is that how I pronounce it? Well,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Everyone will be correcting me here. Come on.
No, it's good. That's what humankind is all about.
So it's redirecting back. Thank you so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Really, your voice is honestly so important, and I am so grateful for your time. And I was so excited about this conversation, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. It's been lovely talking with you, and I hope it's of some worth anyway.
Absolutely, I think it'll hold a lot of worth, an awful lot of worth. Everyone will be redesigning their restaurant.